There comes a moment in every sincere life when the outer world no longer satisfies the deeper longing of the heart. Achievements may be gathered, knowledge accumulated, and beliefs firmly held, yet something remains unfulfilled. This is not failure, it is the gentle signal that the soul is ready to awaken. What we are seeking has never been absent. The infinite we look for in distant places has always lived quietly within our own being. Awakening does not arrive through force of will or intensity of effort. It unfolds when the restless activity of the mind grows tired of chasing answers and becomes still enough to listen. In that stillness, something extraordinary is revealed, a living presence that requires no explanation and no improvement. It is whole, complete, and forever active. We do not create it, we become aware of it. Much of human struggle comes from the belief that life must be managed from the surface level of thought and emotion. We attempt to direct the infinite with personal plans, prayers filled with words, and endless mental arguments. Yet the infinite does not respond to pressure. It reveals itself only when we step aside and allow its nature to be known. When thought pauses, even briefly, a deeper intelligence begins to move, harmonizing what the mind could never organize. This awakening is not dramatic in the way the world defines drama. It is quiet, gentle, and unmistakably real. It feels like coming home after a long journey. The sense of separation softens, and we recognize that life has never been against us. The same infinite that shapes the stars is expressing itself as our breath, our awareness, our very existence. Nothing needs to be added, nothing is missing. As this recognition deepens, the sense of personal limitation begins to dissolve. Fear loses its authority, not because circumstances instantly change, but because our relationship to them does. We no longer face life as isolated individuals trying to survive. We stand as expressions of an inexhaustible source. Guidance arises spontaneously, peace replaces urgency, and right action flows without strain. To awaken to the infinite within is not to escape the world, but to see it anew. Ordinary moments become sacred, silence becomes companionable, and trust replaces anxiety. Life is no longer something to be conquered or controlled, but something to be witnessed as it unfolds from a deeper wisdom. This awakening is available now, not in some future moment of perfection. It begins the instant we stop reaching outward and gently turn within, allowing the infinite to reveal itself as the truth of who we are and who we have always been. 1. The belief that the infinite exists somewhere beyond us has shaped much of human seeking, creating a sense of distance between ourselves and the very source of life we long to know. From this belief arises effort, striving, and the feeling that one day, through enough discipline or understanding, we may finally reach what is sacred and complete. Yet the deeper truth reveals something far simpler and far more intimate. The infinite is not an object to be found, but the very substance of our being. It is not separate from us, observing from afar, but expressing itself as our awareness, our breath, and our capacity to know that we exist. When the infinite is viewed as external, life becomes a negotiation. We attempt to persuade, influence, or earn what we believe lies outside our reach. This creates inner conflict, because the mind is trying to grasp what cannot be grasped through thought. The infinite cannot be approached as an experience to be added to personal identity, because it is the ground upon which identity itself appears. The moment this is glimpsed, even faintly, the search begins to soften. What we have been reaching for outwardly is recognized inwardly as already present. This recognition does not come through intellectual agreement alone. It unfolds in moments of quiet awareness, when thought relaxes its grip and attention turns inward without expectation. In such moments, there is a subtle but unmistakable sense of fullness that does not depend on circumstance. It is not emotional excitement or spiritual elevation. It is a calm assurance of being supported by something vast and intelligent. This presence does not announce itself, it simply is, steady and continuous beneath the changing surface of experience. As this understanding deepens, the idea of a separate self living apart from the infinite begins to lose its solidity. we see that what we call I has never existed independently of the life expressing itself as us. The same infinite that animates the universe is animating our thoughts, movements, and perceptions. We are not channels trying to receive it, we are its living expression. This realization quietly dissolves the fear of lack, because how can that which is the source of all be absent from itself? Living from this awareness changes the quality of daily life without requiring effort to change it. Decisions feel less forced, problems feel less personal, and trust arises naturally. There is a growing sense that life knows how to live itself through us when we stop interfering with fear and excessive control. The infinite does not need to be invited, activated, or improved. It needs only to be recognized as the truth of our own being, ever present, ever active, and silently revealing itself in the depth of our awareness, too. The idea that awakening must be achieved through intense effort is deeply rooted in the human approach to growth. We are taught that progress requires struggle, discipline, and constant striving, so it is natural to carry this belief into the inner life. Yet true awakening does not arise from force or mental exertion. It emerges when effort relaxes and a deeper stillness is allowed to surface. This stillness is not inactivity or passivity. It is a state of alert awareness free from the pressure to achieve or become something other than what is already present. When effort dominates the inner search, the mind remains in control, constantly measuring progress and evaluating results. This creates tension, because the mind is attempting to reach beyond itself using its own tools. Awakening cannot be produced by thought, because thought is part of what is being transcended. The more one struggles to become awakened, the more the sense of separation is reinforced. Stillness, on the other hand, gently loosens the grip of mental activity and creates space for a deeper awareness to reveal itself naturally. Stillness is often misunderstood as silence of sound or the absence of movement. In truth, it is the quieting of inner commentary, the release of the need to label, judge, and control experience. One can be outwardly active and inwardly still. In this inner quiet, awareness rests in itself without direction or agenda. There is no attempt to reach a higher state or to fix what appears imperfect. This lack of intention is what allows true insight to arise, because nothing is being demanded of the moment. As stillness deepens, a subtle shift occurs. Instead of seeking awareness, awareness recognizes itself. There is a sense of being present without effort, as though one has stepped out of a rushing stream and discovered that the water continues to flow without resistance. This recognition brings a feeling of ease and clarity that effort could never produce. Problems that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their emotional charge, not because they are ignored, but because they are seen from a wider perspective. In this state, life is no longer approached as something to be conquered. Action flows spontaneously from inner guidance rather than mental struggle. Creativity, compassion, and wisdom emerge without planning, as natural expressions of a deeper intelligence at work. Stillness reveals that awakening is not an achievement but a remembering. What is realized has always been present beneath the noise of effort and striving, waiting patiently for the mind to grow quiet enough to notice it and allow it to unfold as the natural state of being. 3. The mind is conditioned to search. From the earliest moments of life, it is trained to look outward for answers, security, and meaning, developing the habit of believing that fulfillment lies somewhere ahead or elsewhere. This searching activity becomes so familiar that it feels natural, even necessary. Yet the very movement of searching assumes that what is sought is missing. The deeper insight reveals that this assumption itself is the source of dissatisfaction. When awareness turns inward, the endless seeking of the mind begins to lose its purpose. The search of the mind is driven by memory and anticipation. It compares the present moment with past experiences and imagined futures, constantly measuring what is against what should be. This creates a sense of incompleteness, because the present is never allowed to stand on its own. Even spiritual searching can become another form of mental activity, accumulating concepts, techniques, and beliefs in the hope that one final understanding will bring peace. But peace cannot be reached as an object of thought, because thought can only move within its own limits. Turning inward does not mean rejecting the mind or suppressing thinking. It means allowing awareness to observe the mind without being carried by it. When thoughts are seen rather than followed, their urgency begins to fade. The mind continues to function, but it no longer dominates the sense of identity. In this inward turning, attention rests on the simple fact of being aware. This awareness is not created by effort, it is already present, quietly witnessing every thought and sensation. As awareness recognizes itself, the search naturally comes to an end. There is a subtle realization that what has been sought through experiences, relationships, and achievements has always been here as the background of all experience. This recognition does not arrive as a dramatic conclusion, but as a gentle settling. The feeling of almost there dissolves, replaced by a sense of completeness that does not depend on conditions. Inner dissatisfaction begins to fade because it is no longer fed by constant comparison. Without the need to become something else, life is met directly as it is. This does not result in indifference or withdrawal from the world. On the contrary, engagement becomes more authentic because actions are no longer driven by the need to fill an inner void. They arise from clarity rather than lack. When the search ends, simplicity returns. Ordinary moments regain their depth, and there is an ease in being that was previously obscured by mental striving. The mind still operates when needed, but it is no longer the master. Awareness, resting in itself, provides a quiet fulfillment that searching could never satisfy, revealing that the end of seeking is not a loss, but the discovery of what has always been present beneath the movement of the mind. 4. Silence is often mistaken for emptiness, as though nothing exists when sound and thought subside. Because the human mind is accustomed to activity, it assumes that meaning and presence depend upon movement, expression, and explanation. Yet silence is not a void, it is a doorway. When outer noise and inner commentary grow quiet, something deeper begins to be felt, not as an idea but as a living reality. This silence does not need to be created, it is already here, waiting beneath the surface of constant mental motion. Most people live surrounded by inner noise. Thoughts repeat themselves, emotions react automatically, and attention is continually pulled outward. In this state, the deeper presence within us remains unnoticed, not because it is absent, but because it is subtle. Silence gently removes the distractions that keep awareness occupied. As attention rests without effort, a quiet sense of being emerges, steady and unchanging, unaffected by circumstances or moods. This presence does not arrive when silence appears, it is revealed by silence. It has always been active, sustaining life, guiding growth, and expressing intelligence through every function of being. The heartbeat, the breath, and the capacity to perceive all arise from this unseen source. Silence allows us to sense that life is not something we personally manage, but something that is already managing itself through us with remarkable precision. In silence, there is no need to ask for guidance in words. Insight arises spontaneously, often without explanation. Decisions feel simpler, not because options disappear, but because clarity replaces confusion. This is the activity of the presence within, functioning without noise or instruction. It does not argue, persuade, or demand attention. It simply knows and acts through intuitive awareness. As familiarity with silence deepens, trust begins to replace effort. There is a growing recognition that life has never been dependent solely on personal control. Even before we became conscious of it, this inner presence was already at work, healing, balancing, and adjusting the flow of experience. Silence brings this realization out of abstraction and into direct awareness. This does not mean withdrawing from speech or activity. Silence becomes an inner condition that remains even while words are spoken and actions are taken. One may speak, work, and interact, yet remain inwardly quiet, grounded in a sense of being supported by something greater than thought. From this state, actions feel less reactive and more aligned, less forced and more natural. Through silence, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. What once seemed distant or hidden is recognized as intimate and ever-present. The presence revealed in silence is not separate from us. It is the very life expressing itself as our awareness, quietly active, endlessly available, and patiently waiting to be noticed. 5. The sense of personal limitation shapes much of human experience. From early life, identity is formed around the idea of being a separate individual with fixed abilities, defined boundaries, and unavoidable weaknesses. This sense of me appears solid and unquestionable, yet it is largely constructed from memory, conditioning, and belief. When life is approached from this standpoint, challenges feel heavy and overwhelming, because they are carried by a self that believes it must manage everything alone. Recognition of the infinite within begins to soften this burden and gradually dissolve the walls of limitation. Personal limitation survives through identification with thought. Thoughts describe what we can or cannot do, what we deserve, and what is possible for us. When these thoughts are accepted without question, they form an inner cage that restricts perception. Yet these thoughts arise within awareness. They are not the awareness itself. As this distinction becomes clear, the authority of limiting beliefs weakens. We begin to see that the self we have been defending and improving is not the true source of life or action. In moments of deep recognition, there is a quiet shift from living as a doer to living as an expression. Instead of seeing life as something happening to a separate me, there is an awareness that life is happening through us. The infinite is no longer an idea but a felt reality expressing intelligence, creativity, and order. In this recognition, fear of inadequacy loses its grip, because the source of action is no longer personal effort alone. This does not eliminate individuality or human experience. Personality, preferences, and circumstances remain, but they are no longer seen as the sum total of what we are. They become instruments rather than identities. The infinite does not erase the human form, it animates it. When this is understood, limitation is no longer fought or denied. It is transcended naturally through a wider sense of being. As limitation dissolves, there is a noticeable change in how challenges are met. Problems are no longer approached with desperation or self-doubt. There is an inner assurance that solutions do not depend solely on mental analysis or personal strength. Insight arises from a deeper level, often in ways the mind could not predict. This brings humility rather than pride, because the recognition is not of personal power, but of participation in a greater wholeness. Living from this awareness brings a quiet freedom. Effort becomes balanced, responsibility feels lighter, and trust replaces constant self-evaluation. The burden of proving oneself begins to fall away. What remains is a natural expression of life, moving with greater ease and authenticity. In the recognition of the infinite within, personal limitation is not destroyed by force. It gently dissolves as the false sense of separation gives way to a deeper truth of boundless being. 6. When life is lived from the belief that we are separate individuals striving to reach something greater, daily experience often feels fragmented and demanding. Each situation appears as a problem to be solved through effort, planning, and control. Yet when awareness shifts to the recognition of the infinite within, the way life is experienced begins to change in a quiet but profound manner. This transformation does not occur because circumstances are forced into alignment, but because the inner point from which life is lived has changed. Living from the infinite means allowing a deeper intelligence to take the lead rather than relying solely on personal reasoning. This intelligence does not operate through urgency or fear. It functions with clarity and balance, revealing itself through intuitive knowing, calm decision-making, and a sense of right timing. Daily actions no longer feel like constant struggles for control. There is a natural flow in which what needs to be done becomes clear without excessive mental effort. As this way of living unfolds, Relationships begin to reflect greater harmony. When we are no longer driven by the need to defend a limited self, interactions soften, listening becomes more genuine, reactions less automatic, and compassion arises without being manufactured. The infinite expresses itself as understanding and patience, allowing others to be as they are without the need to correct or control them. This does not weaken boundaries, it strengthens them through clarity rather than conflict. Work and responsibility also take on a different quality. Tasks are approached with presence rather than resistance. Creativity emerges more freely, because the mind is no longer burdened by self-doubt or the pressure to perform. Even challenges are met with a sense of trust that solutions will appear at the appropriate moment. This trust is not blind optimism, but a quiet confidence rooted in lived experience of inner guidance. One of the most noticeable transformations is the reduction of inner conflict. When life is lived from the infinite, there is less argument with what is. Acceptance does not mean resignation, it means meeting reality without the added burden of mental resistance. From this acceptance, effective action naturally arises. Energy once consumed by worry and self-judgment becomes available for constructive and creative expression. This transformation does not require constant awareness or perfection. There may still be moments of distraction, fear, or effort. The difference lies in the ability to return inward and rest again in the deeper source. Over time, this return becomes easier and more natural, gradually shaping the overall quality of life. Living from the infinite reveals that transformation is not something we achieve through discipline or self-improvement. It is the natural result of aligning with what has always been present. As this alignment deepens, daily life becomes a quiet expression of inner wholeness, guided by a wisdom that does not struggle, compete, or exhaust itself, but moves with effortless purpose through every ordinary moment. The awakening to the infinite within brings the journey full circle, revealing that what we have been seeking through effort, belief, and experience has never been absent. Each stage of understanding gently points away from struggle and toward recognition. Stillness replaces striving, silence reveals an ever-present presence, and the restless search of the mind comes to rest in simple awareness. In this recognition, the sense of personal limitation dissolves, not through denial, but through the realization that life has always been lived from a greater source. As this awareness becomes more familiar, life is no longer approached as a problem to be solved, but as an expression unfolding from within. Guidance arises naturally, trust replaces fear, and action flows with clarity rather than pressure. The infinite does not transform life by changing circumstances first, it transforms life by changing the standpoint from which we meet them. What once felt heavy becomes lighter, what once felt confusing becomes clear, and what once felt distant is recognized as intimate and immediate. This awakening is not reserved for special moments or spiritual retreat. It is available in the midst of ordinary living, in quiet pauses, and in attentive awareness. It asks for no perfection, only a willingness to turn inward and rest in what is already present. In doing so, we discover that the infinite has always been expressing itself as our life, patiently waiting to be acknowledged. The true conclusion of this realization is not an ending, but a beginning of living from a deeper truth, where life is experienced not as a personal struggle, but as a continuous unfolding of inner wholeness and peace.